I'm Shelby Conley. I've been practicing acupuncture for over 20 years, and I'm the owner of 5 Elements Living Retreat Center in upstate New York. Each week, I'll take you on a journey from the heart of the city into rural hidden areas to discover various healing art centers and wellness experiences that will encourage you to live as well as possible. Let's shift your focus to see how these healing modalities are becoming the new medicine. Join me en route to the alternative. Hello, I'm Shelby Conley, and welcome to En Route to the Alternative. Today we're sitting down with David Brickman in his second location in Syracuse for the Bodymind Float Center. We look at what a deprivation tank or an isolation tank looks like, as well as his Himalayan salt room. So tell us, you started actually in Rochester for Syracuse.
That's right, we opened Bodymind Float Center. We're just about to finish our 4th year, begin our 5th year. It's gone by in a flash.
And is that's in Rochester? Is that
That's in Rochester, Park Ave in Rochester, yeah.
David is a violinist with the Philharmonic in Rochester, New York, and he explains what brought him to floating and why he'd want to open his own center. And what brought you to floating? What is it about music and floating that went together?
I just floated on a lark, really. I was in Portland, Oregon, which is kind of the center of floating, maybe in the world. There are about 4 different businesses that provide flotation tanks in Portland, and 2 of my best friends live there, and one of them, I was out there on music business, and one of them said, "You want to float while you're here?"
How long ago was that?
That was, so we opened 4 years ago. That was about just a little over 5 years ago. So once I got this idea in my head, we
went
moved
with it
fast, yeah. But I went in there without too much concern. I wasn't too worried about that. The mental chatter had just quieted so much, and I've done long retreats. I've done 7-day, they're called sesshin, silent retreats, and these are there's a lot of effort, and you have to set aside a week of your life to do this. And so I've experienced what it's like to have a very quiet mind, but to come out of a 90-minute effortless, blissful experience in a float tank and to get a real taste of that was extraordinary to me. And this is one of the things that people seek when they float is...
I want to take out the negative connotation of the word deprivation, meaning depriving yourself, when really you're going into this tank to get rid of mental chatter. David talks about the thoughts that go through our mind and coming out of our head and into our bodies as we get into the tank.
Is to quiet the mental chatter and just have time and a place and where they can reflect, meditate, pray, do creative work. So
I would imagine that it's a cumulative effect as well. The more you float, the easier it is to drop down.
That's true.
You know, the first time there's the apprehension that you talked about, and the worry, and just thinking about, and then you're right, thinking about other people doing it as well beside you or in another room. Then I'm thinking that they start to come down before they even get into the tank, that their bodies have a muscle memory.
There's not much of a learning curve with floating. It's pretty simple. Even compared with floating in a pool, it's effortless because the float tanks have about 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt dissolved, which makes the solution very dense, like the Dead Sea, and so a human being is extremely buoyant.
So David talks about the Dead Sea. It's roughly 8.6 times saltier than the ocean, and with the high mineral content of the water, it produces a very low content of pollens and allergens in the atmosphere. It's also a reduction of the ultraviolet light coming from the sun. And with the higher atmospheric pressure in this great depth, you can add to the specific health effects. And biblically, the Dead Sea was a place of refuge for King David. It was one of the first of the world's health resorts.
So you don't have to use any brain hardware.
Did somebody else come up with that formula about how much salt goes in?
We in the float business are always trying to perfect what we're doing, but about 1.3 density is the right density to float effortlessly. But we wanted to make sure that people didn't get in a float tank and spend their time focusing on the novelty or the apprehension or something like that. 90 minutes gives almost every person on the first.
They have found that the perfect time to be in the float tank is about 90 minutes. You can go less, but they really feel that the 90 minutes gives your body the time for the deep relaxation and for the gravity, the anti-gravity, to work. So it's not just about the floating, it's dark. There's no sound. So that's part of the deprivation, is taking away the senses, so that you have no touch feeling, because once you're floating, there's no sensory for touch. It's dark for the eyes. Is there a smell?
There's a faint smell of the Epsom salts. I can't describe a smell, but it's faint, and it recedes from consciousness over time. The power of floating comes from the absence of sensory stimulation, but there are other aspects of it that it has to do with what your brain doesn't have to do while you're in this environment. Normally, your brain is busy processing lots of sensory stimulation, but also we live on a planet that has gravity, and we have to balance our bodies in a gravitational field. That whole burden is lifted, that processing burden, and it's significant to balance a flesh and blood body on 2 feet, or even to sit in a chair.
On joints, the spine. The spine is the neck, but especially people who have, I think about the people that I treat, they have neck pain, they have back pain, joint pain, to just be. And like you said, zero gravity is probably.
And then even the other aspect of floating that is worth mentioning is you don't have to regulate body temperature. The water is skin temperature neutral. So this is not a hot tub.
I was a little worried when he was explaining that you aren't getting into a hot tub, that you were getting into what body temperature feels like. And I thought I would feel chilled and a little cold. Not at all. Once you get into that state, it's actually a feeling I've never experienced before. I mean, we go from hot and cold, from different rooms, different temperatures, different seasons. This really was quite peaceful and the most comfortable I think I've ever been.
You don't go in and think, ooh, that's nice and warm. When you are still, and when the water is still, as you said, the idea is for all tactile sensation to be lifted. And it's just a beautiful coincidence that this skin temperature neutral also happens to be a temperature at which you can theoretically float indefinitely without getting too warm or too cool. And so pregnant women love floating. They're cautioned about hot tubs because you don't want to pass out when you get out, but in a float tank you're not becoming overheated over time, so you can.
David has found by listening to the clients that come out of the float tank that 90 minutes zips by. I found that to be my experience as well. Once you start to relax, let go of your thoughts, time flies by.
The great majority of people find that the time zips by, and they'll say, oh my gosh, when you played the music to alert me to the end of my session, I thought there was a mistake. It felt like 30 minutes or something like that, and I got out and I checked my phone and I couldn't believe
that they actually let their bodies relax and their mind let go.
Once this relaxation response kicks in, it's called theta brainwave.
David talks about brainwaves. So when you think about the 4 levels of the brainwaves, beta is when we're talking, alpha is a relaxed state, daydreaming, then it goes to theta. If you skip to delta, that's where you're sleeping, so it's that in-between stage of when you're daydreaming and when you're falling into a deep sleep. So therefore, between the alpha state, where you're daydreaming, and the delta state, where you're sleeping, is the spot in between where you want deep meditation. So whether you're meditating or floating and doing them regularly, you can get into that theta stage, that creative, peaceful stage, more quickly.
Certainly will fall asleep, which is very common and utterly safe. But if you're not that exhausted, you're likely to spend big chunks of your 90 minutes in this theta state. And people find this blissful and useful. Creative ideas come to them, solutions to problems they're having in their work life or their personal lives.
They get some clarity.
Yeah, and I usually go into a float tank without an agenda, but some people will specifically say, I'm going to examine this question or this issue, and that's what I hope to get out of this float today.
Absolutely, I didn't think of it that way, that they come in with something they want to get clarity on and find some wisdom about. Well, that's incredible. So when you talked about the weightlessness of it. Does anybody get nauseous?
It happens. It's not common. I would say maybe maybe 1 out of 500 people or 250 people will get a little motion sickness. This can happen to people who've floated many times, and it can, of course, it can happen to somebody who's never floated before. I don't know of a case where it's happened to the same person twice.
The other piece of Bodymind Float Center is the Himalayan Salt Room, and that is a beautiful space. Could you tell us about it?
Yeah, we call it the salt room. There is Himalayan salt in the backlit walls. We built we didn't build, we had someone build 4 beautiful backlit salt walls. They're actual bricks of Himalayan salt, just as dense and heavy. And
where did you find them?
Well, they came from the Himalayas. They were cut there. There's the basis of it comes from the salt which we put into the air during the session. Now in the float tanks we use magnesium sulfate, that's Epsom salt. In the salt room we use only pharmaceutically pure sodium chloride. This is table salt.
David explains the drying effects that the salt has in the air. So when somebody comes in with any kind of congestion or any kind of sinus problems, the sinuses get dried out when they breathe in the air of the salt.
Now, everybody has experienced a clogged salt shaker when it gets humid in the summer. Salt is hydrophilic. It loves moisture. Moisture is drawn to the salt, and this is the basis of halotherapy. So we grind salt into tiny particles between 1 and 10 microns when we have a machine that does that, and then it's blown into the air. And the salt will settle where congestion lies, in the lungs, in the sinuses, and moisture is drawn to the salt, and this thins secretions and helps the body clear itself through natural means and eliminating the need to take drugs. Salt is also has an anti-inflammatory properties and also antimicrobial, so it helps fight infection and it helps reduce inflammation and then this thinning of mucus. And so people with asthma, people with allergies, sinus problems, cough, chronic cough, even cystic fibrosis have gotten benefit out of salt.
And then how often will they come?
Well, we're a little reluctant to offer prescriptions
to do a diagnosis
time.
and a prescription.
It's not uncommon for somebody who's experiencing sinus pain or headache to feel relief in one session. I'm so grateful for that.
Where did you first experience that?
Let's see. Probably.
While there are other facilities that create a cave atmosphere, David has chosen a modern facility where you can relax and be peaceful.
Deck their rooms out to look like caves. They put salt on the walls and they create stalactites and stalagmites. But while those features can be lovely and cool to experience, they're not an integral part.
Right, they're not medicinal of any sort.
Yeah, that's right. They don't have any effect. So we just decided for a cleaner look.
So let's take a look at the rooms.
All right, let's.
Okay. So how many rooms do you have?
We have 4 float rooms that are ready to float people, and we've got 4 more ready to go when
really? In demand?
Yeah, when the demand is there for it, we're ready to expand.
And then the Himalayan Salt Room is a group room.
That's right. We put up to 4 people in that room, but it's quite a spacious room, so you're not on top of each other.
That's right.
So this is our salt room.
This is absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you very much. Again, the environment helps people relax, which is critical in the floating. Not as critical, but why not make it a beautifully a pleasant experience.
And there's no aromatherapy because the salt alone is powerful enough.
It's just salt. There's no Himalayan salt being ground and put into the air. The only thing that's going into the air is pharmaceutically pure sodium chloride, because we just want to know that that's what you're breathing in.
While it was a peaceful, clean room, the way that it looks isn't about the benefits. It really is about the salt coming out of the wall and being able to breathe that in.
Salt rooms like this are actually in hospitals, some in Europe, and it's quite common behind the Eastern Bloc countries, in Poland, where it was invented. Latvia and Russia, this is well-known therapy to those populations and actually part of hospitals.
So yeah.
So this we call the Cathedral Pool, and this is a different style of float tank. We call it an open float pool, and this provides the same experience as the enclosed tanks without this impediment of having to get in something small and something enclosed. This is actually suitable for a couple, but we'll also float solo floaters in here. In this case, the room itself becomes like a giant float tank.
Sure.
And so we've got extra soundproofing, and we've taken measures to make sure that it's perfectly dark in here. We've got infrared heating panels on the ceiling. Actually, that's in all the rooms.
Yes.
And they enable us to maintain exactly the right temperature. Hot yoga studios will use this same technology.
After David gave us a tour, now it's time to get into the tank. While laying in the tank, I did hear the mental chatter, and I could feel every ache and pain in my body. And then with just a few minutes, it all disappeared. And you don't have to worry about the 90 minutes. It's not for you to keep track of. Somebody will come in very quietly and let you know when your time is finished.
Okay, Shelby, whenever you're ready, you can just reverse what you did. Just come to a kneeling position and just push that door open. And these guys are ready for you. Take your time.
That was really...
Can you describe a little bit of what it felt like in your own words?
Sure. I had a moment when I laid down that I felt enclosed. It didn't last long at all. I really started to take some nice deep breaths and relax. And I could hear my own breathing, which was relaxing in itself. You can't hear a thing. You can't see anything, even when you think your eyes are going to adjust in a dark room, but it stays completely dark. And your thoughts come up. Some thoughts are pleasing, some aren't, just how your mind goes, and then it just totally goes quiet in your thoughts. Very peaceful.
The two promises that the float tank wants to provide is pain relief and the release of endorphins for the imaginative, creative thinking. I have to tell you, I experienced both, with the back pain that I was having on the trip, and as well as coming up with old feelings and memories that were very pleasant. After 5 to 10 minutes, when you first start into the tank, that's when the parasympathetic nervous system starts to become involved, where the heart rate slows down, and so does the breathing. And that's when the imagery comes through the mind and the pain starts to drift away. One of the questions I had was, how long are the benefits going to last after each float? And David did say they build on each other. So like anything else, whether it be acupuncture, meditation, massage, even taking certain medications, it depends on the person. Everybody's bodies are going to react differently and hold on to it differently. David was a wonderful host, and I really felt calm and peaceful while I was there. But when I left, I really took the remains of that float with me throughout the rest of the day. It was about mental clarity, and it was about being able to breathe easier and to know that I want to go back regularly. I think going back regularly would add to my own self-care of meditation and massage and acupuncture. It's a great addition to how I already take care of myself. As part of my private practice, I probably would recommend people going for pain. A lot of people have back pain, and a lot of people have joint pain, and those people probably would benefit the most, as well as the people who are going through anxiety and depression. It might scare them when they first get into the tank with the darkness, But after that, I think they would deeply appreciate the isolation and the quiet and the joy that it can bring up later in their life. Join us next time as we meet new people, eat great food, and find holistic adventures. And for outtakes and extended viewing footage, or if you have a space that's unique to the health and wellness field that you'd like us to film, take a look at enroutetothealternative.com.